Hi, my name's Angela Casey and welcome to Edinburgh Outdoors, the podcast that explores Edinburgh's green spaces and the people in them. In this episode, which is effectively a treasure hunt, we discover one of those quirky old Edinburgh stories that goes back to the 1400s when the Trinity Collegiate Church was built. In the 1800s, the church was demolished to make way for an expansion of Waverley Station, and the stones were numbered and left on Calton Hill for 30 years, during which time many of them were stolen, finding themselves in houses, gardens and buildings all over the city. So I went to find out about a project which has been working out where the stones ended up. As you can hear, I'm not outside right now. We are starting off in the Trinity Apse Church on Chalmers Close. And I'm here today with two people. One is Jill Harrison and the other is podcast favourite Hetty Lancaster from Hetty's History Walks. And first off, I'm going to talk to Jill, who's going to tell me what the treasure hunt is and why we're here and where she's from. So hi Jill, welcome to Edinburgh Outdoors.
Hello.
So where are you from and what are you doing and why are we here?
Well, I'm from Northumberland, but I fell in love with this building and it's quite a long story and it's a very exciting story and it's turned up the project that Hetty and I are involved in, which we call Reviving the Trinity Stones. And this is an offshoot of a bigger project called the Trinity Network, which I run. And it's to protect this fantastic building that nobody knows about, the Trinity Collegiate Church, or what is left of it. But the project you're asking about is the culmination of 2 years' work funded by the Old Edinburgh Club, which is where I met Hetty, to try and find some of the fabulous stones that were left, lost, pinched, disappeared when this glorious building was taken down to make way for Waverley Station in 1848.
So there was the Trinity Collegiate Church and that was built where Platform 2 is now, is that right?
Yes, on Leith Wynd, and it was the entry, it was on one of the main roads from the busy port of Leith, which was why it was built there, because it was a massive statement of magnificence by the Queen who built it, Mary of Guelders, who is as forgotten as this church is and deserves an awful lot more attention. The council, who had taken it over for several hundred years, decided that they would sell it to the North British Railway Company in the name of progress so that the Waverley Station could be expanded. And they set off this fantastic fight that continued for about 30 years. They took it down, they were paid £16,000 with the intent that they would put it back up again. They would relocate it, take it down stone by stone, find somewhere else for it and relocate it. The stones were numbered very, very carefully and they were piled up in a big heap on Regent Road, just near Calton Hill. But the council for over 30 years couldn't make their minds up where to relocate it. And they decided to put it here.
Yes.
And you can see why it's been forgotten, because the location is tucked away.
Yeah, we're really tucked away. So we're down a close, which is off the high street.
Yes.
And it goes down to the station, more or less.
A minute away from the station.
Yeah. And many Edinburgh residents might know this as the old brass rubbing centre,
yes,
which is what it was. But now it's just empty. You can have events here, is that right?
Well, that's rather the problem, because it was used as a brass rubbing centre and occasionally for fringe events, the occasional concert. But much more recently, it's been closed to the public. And one of the things that we want to do is to try and find a better future for it.
Yeah.
Because it's a fabulous building.
It's amazing. It's really beautiful. So talking about the stones, because that's why we're here today, I'm looking around and I can see that there are numbers on the stones on the wall, but they're not sequential. So
they're totally random. This is all that is left is a third of the original.
Right.
It had chancels and aisles, different small chapels, beautiful porch, all sorts of interesting architectural details. But this is a sort of a microcosm of what it was like.
Yeah.
So you still get a sense of its grandeur.
You do.
And the sense of ambition of the Queen who built it.
So there's quite a lot. If I'm looking at this and this is 1/3 of what the original was, twice as many stones as are in this big building are somewhere else.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
So you're finding them. That's a lot of stones to look for.
There's a lot of stones. And we're never going to find them all, and there is knowledge of some of them. There are little bits that you can pick up, and people think that this might be a Trinity stone, that might be a Trinity stone, and certainly the project is very much about asking for ones that haven't been found. And we put a sort of an SOS out, and lots of people got in touch, and I think we've probably got about 100 new stones out of this project, some really important ones, because people tended to take all the pretty ones. They took all the carved heads and the Gothic traceries, and they wanted them in their rockeries and their gardens. And it's a lot of private people in various places. Morningside are particularly rich in them. Isn't that terrific? I love that. But they've been very good, and they've got in touch, and we've gone and had a look at them, and we've literally uncovered out of the bushes some fabulous stones, some really interesting ones.
It's really interesting, isn't it? So, Hetty, welcome to Edinburgh Outdoors again. What's your role in this?
So I became involved through my role as a trustee of the Old Edinburgh Club, who have funded Jill's project through one of their Jean Guild grants. So each project is allocated a trustee, and I specifically asked, when I saw Jill's project was accepted, I had to be assigned to it, because about 10 years ago, when I was a history student, I actually used to volunteer at the Museum of Edinburgh in their architectural fragments courtyard, which holds some of the Trinity stones. And I became really interested in the Trinity stones, but didn't know much about them, even though I had been here in the Alps at various points, and then I've just been supporting Jill in whatever way I can, and then latterly helping with the exhibition that's going to be on later this year.
Right, and we'll talk about that later. And at the moment we're being given a slot in the Trinity Alps. As I'm looking up at some of those windows and the patterns, I mean, were they recreated or are they original?
They've probably been restored, repaired to a large extent.
Well, if you're saying that the pretty bits got pinched, I guess the tops of the windows, I've seen some around, which I think are probably tops of windows embedded in walls.
This is a piscina, and this gives you a sense of how beautiful the original carving was. It's a bit eroded. But if you look up inside it, here, you can see that they've gone to the same sort of trouble to carve it on the inside.
Of the ceiling, isn't it?
It's got its own little rib vaulting underneath there. There are all sorts of different carved heads here that are so typical of the Trinity, and that's one of the ways that we can identify other stones because of style. That's about the only way we can do it, by comparison.
Some of it must be guesswork, is it?
Yes. And this is the masons, the medieval masons, who did their own thing very much.
Oh. This one up here looks a bit crazy. He looks like a berserker, doesn't he?
You can see more and more of the faces when you look round on the tops of the pillars there. There's lots of these faces where they're sort of grimacing with their hands in their mouths. Monkeys, lots of monkeys. One of the things that we would like to do as a follow-on from this is maybe a digital reconstruction project where we can put all the stones that we found back into the building, which would be wonderful, so that we would get a proper sense of what it looked like using the stones that we're finding. So it's a case of cataloguing them and taking records, proper records of them, knowing where they are, and making sure that they're safe.
Yes. And we're going to go and see some of them, which are protected in the Museum of Edinburgh shortly, aren't we?
Yes.
And go and see some that are in Greyfriars.
Yes.
So we're going on a bit of a treasure hunt.
Yeah. So this is a plan of the Trinity Collegiate Church as its whole thing, and the apse is just part of it. So, Jill, which part is the apse on this picture, if you can point that out?
And the apse is where the altar goes, is that right?
The main
church?
Yes, the high altar.
This section is the only bit that remains.
With this wonderful vaulting.
With the wonderful
here,
vaulting.
And everything else has gone.
Okay.
Wow, it's a lot of rockeries and a lot of buildings.
Another part of the jigsaw puzzle, in that when the church was taken down and it was put up here, it was attached to another church, John Lascelles' Church of Moray Knox, 1877. So there was this huge church with seating for hundreds, and these blind arches were open to go through into that church. And then I think it was 1966 the other church was knocked down and these were all blocked off.
So people can come and see the outside, but it's in a bit of a mess.
These were all sort of planted with like a little physic garden, believe it or not, at some point.
The reason you're coming into the Museum of Edinburgh is being through to the courtyard at the back where there are some of the Trinity stones now and where they're being preserved.
So this is the rear courtyard at the Museum of Edinburgh, and this is largely a courtyard of architectural fragments. And so these are all stones. So when Edinburgh Old Town has been redeveloped by the Victorians and in other periods, when they built the bridges and stuff like that, some of the ornate stones were seen as to be too important to throw away, and so they were collected and they've ended up here. So this museum is just a kind of collection point. So we've got various different things. So that one is off one of the poorhouses, the St Cuthbert's poorhouse. We've got marriage lintels in here, things from the rights houses, sundials. I think one of the interesting things for this podcast is that over there we've got this bench that's known as the monk's seat, and you can see that has been remade in the 19th century from door lintels. Mm-hmm. So this is another sort of a later idea of people kind of taking old stones and making them into something else. So this used to be, I think it was at Grange House. It was at one of the kind of big houses in Edinburgh, which when that got demolished, it comes back to the Museum of Edinburgh. But that's the kind of thing that people would have been doing, I think, with the Trinity stones. So there's quite a few Trinity stones. So this is one of the places that people can come and see the Trinity stones. The courtyard is usually closed during the winter months, but it is open during the summer. And this is where I used to volunteer. I used to do all the weeding and such like, and wrote a guide and things like that for this. So we do have some original Trinity stones in here. And they're sort of scattered about. Right. So when we do the exhibition, we're going to have a little map so that people can come out and find them. But we've got one of these little stone bosses here. This is one of these pinnacles. So they're these very high bits right up on the top. So the kind of twiddly bits that you kind of see on Gothic buildings, as I was thinking, was twiddly bits. We've also got, these are trade stones. These are from the Netherbow Port. Actually, from the original, not the original Netherbow Port, but from the old Netherbow Port.
The one that was in the middle of the road.
The one that was in the middle of the road. So this is the bit that supposedly had the metal spike, where they popped all the traitors' heads. This is one of the big bosses from the Trinity Collegiate Church. This is now upside down, so this would have been a massive ceiling boss. Wow. So it's incredibly well
they've
preserved.
done it so that we can see it.
Yeah, so these are actually the ribs coming out of the bottom, and that would have been up on the ceiling.
Yeah.
So this massive big kind of keystone, I guess, to some of the vaulting. And this is a little kind of gargoyle.
Is that from Trinity?
This is also from the Trinity. Suspect that this was a kind of water spout. We've got a channel in the back. It's missing its head, so it's almost kind of like tied up. So this is a kind of punishment. What other things have we got in here? John, Angela. Hello. Angela, John.
I'm John Losses. I'm the city's archaeologist, so basically regional archaeologist for the City of Edinburgh Council.
Right. That's a nice job to have.
It's, how can I explain it? It's really acting as a planning consultant, or consultant for the council, so it varies from most of the day-to-day job is liaising with developers and responding to planning applications, which that's where 95% of all archaeological work and research is done across the UK. Another part of it is why you're here today is I curate or look after the council's archaeological collections, which include large amounts of fragments from the Trinity Kirk, which you can see in our courtyard today. This is the rear courtyard we're standing in at the moment, but the front courtyard, we've got a lot more bits of it there. A lot of demolition happened in the 16th, 17th, 18th century, taking down buildings, reusing. So you'll go around, you'll see bits of lintels and etc. They're just reusing stone because it's cheaper.
Well, basically, it's here, Greyfriars and the National Museum of Scotland. And you can see the apse from the outside.
Garden of the apse, and that's all.
Yeah, so the outside of the apse had lots of these kind of water spouts, which you can see in this picture here. This one is very rude. So, yeah, medieval sense of humour. There was a lot of scatological sense of humour in the medieval period. So they quite liked that.
Yeah.
But we also have some capitals here. So again, you'll recognise these kind of leaf shapes from when we were inside the app. So the capitals are the decorative bits that sit at the top of columns.
Right.
Is what they are. Am I right in thinking they're capitals, Jill?
Yes.
Is that what they are?
Yes.
Right, just checking.
What's interesting about this guy is that this is so typical of the Trinity, and one of the problems is when people say, have I got a Trinity stone? We really don't know. It's very difficult because it might just be an ordinary medieval stone. But if they've got a weird little face like this, then we can say, well, it is very likely, because this is so typical of one particular mason, maybe several masons that worked for the Trinity, and they've got these strange little heads. Sometimes they're upside down, sometimes they've got their tongue sticking out, but they're brilliant for stylistic comparisons.
Right. So that's how you
which is
spot
really
them.
useful.
One of my favourite faces is on the stone right next door, and he's this tiny little guy. We've also got a face here, which apparently is a stylised leopard. Or that at least is what the archaeological notes said about it. So it's a bit of a pity that they're quite low down, because it's very difficult to see him.
That's a different piece to the piece that's above it, actually. I've just realised that's two different pieces.
Yes, so these are two different capitals.
Yeah.
But what about these bits?
This is a little bit of tracery.
Oh, yeah. A tracer is the top of a window, is that right?
It's the stone that forms all those curly bits in the window. And it's interesting, you can see the slots on that, where the glass would have been held.
Oh, yes.
I'm sure all these bits would be too. I think one of the reasons why there's so many in Morningside is that there were lots of masons' yards, and they would have been involved in maybe taking down the church in the first place, and they would take some of the stones away. And that might be one of the reasons why there's so many up there in Morningside.
So actually, for you, it's quite hard in some cases to identify that they're Trinity stones.
One of the other things we'd like to do is to get funding so that we could do chemical analysis of the stones that we know that they came from a very tiny quarry where the Balmoral Hotel used to be, called the Barefoot Park Quarry, which was the quarry of Craigley's beautiful Craigley seam sandstone that was used specifically to make the Trinity Collegiate Church in the first place. So if we could do a technical analysis on the known Trinity stones, then we would be able to do a more scientific way of deciding whether these stones were Trinity stones. But that costs money, which we don't have.
Yeah.
And we've got to be very careful about not damaging stones.
So while you were doing the project, you put out a call to people who might have stones, and people contacted you, is that right?
Yes.
Right. And so how did that work?
It was mostly Morningside people who got in touch, and we've been and had a look, and we're just amazed at how many bits have turned up in different places. They're really keen to look after them.
Yes.
Which is exactly what we want. We just want to know that they're there, what they look like, so that it's another bit in our jigsaw puzzle.
Right, so you're not going to take them away?
No, we
They
would
can keep
never.
them.
No, they're theirs.
Yeah.
No.
And are they embedded in walls or embedded in soil?
All sorts. Some are
Right.
in walls, some are set up in very nice sort of decorative bits in rockery, so there's all sorts.
I think it's rather funny.
It's wonderful.
I mean, I know it's crime that people took them, but at the same
Ancient
time,
crime.
ancient crime. But I think it's rather funny now that people of Morningside have got their rockery stones and
Yes.
things, and they're actually the Trinity stones.
But they love them, and that I think is really important. They're proud of them.
How many do you think you've found of what was originally there?
Of wholly new ones, maybe about 50 or 60, but I've also followed up lots of leads, little bits in articles that there may have been stones, and we found one in another location that I'm sworn to secrecy not to say where it is, but there are about 50 fabulous pieces, probably the best pieces of all.
Oh, really?
And
All in the same place?
all in the same place. So there will be a photographic survey. This is part of the OEC funding that I got to do this survey of all the bits that we've got now,
Yeah.
so that people can look at them. They'll have access to them maybe online, and they'll have photographs and a little bit of detail about what their function is within the church. So it's adding to the knowledge of the Trinity Collegiate Church and everything to do with it.
The Morningside angle is really interesting, and in fact the Old Edinburgh Club are also funding another project looking at medieval masons in Morningside and trying to work out how so many of the stones got to Morningside. So there is there's a linked kind of project going on as well.
So tell me when the project's due to complete and what happens next at that point.
Well, at the end, the idea was always that we were going to have a small exhibition and we would put on show as much information as we had about the stones that we'd found. But we were really lucky, and instead of having a week, we've now been given the opportunity to have 2 months at the Museum of Edinburgh, which is perfect because it's so close and it's in the right area and it's very accessible. So it'll be open from the 9th of May to the 28th of June. And we decided at that stage that we would love to do a free outreach programme to tell everybody about what we were doing, about the importance of the stones, about the story of the Trinity. And I'm going to be giving talks here in the Museum of Edinburgh. I'm doing 3. Hetty's going to do 1, all about the Trinity Church and about the stones, and then an important one at the end about what next. What is the future of this? What are we going to do? Why are we doing this? And to explain to people and raise awareness and try and get more support.
So I'm going to do some free walks, which will start here from the Museum of Edinburgh and we'll finish up at the National Museum of Scotland. And it's really to sort of show people what little bits of medieval Edinburgh that still exist and just try and help people picture what medieval Edinburgh would have been like when the Trinity Church is being built towards the end of the 15th century. Because there's not a huge amount of Edinburgh left, but I think there's enough that we can build a picture, and we'll take in some of the stones as well. So all the walks and talks, people will get the opportunity to come around the exhibition with either me or Jill. Obviously there's the stones here at the Museum of Edinburgh. I will take people to look at the apse from the outside. We will not have access inside, and then we'll look at other bits of medieval Edinburgh and go up and have a look at some of the stones in Greyfriars Kirkyard and also in the National Museum of Scotland as well.
That's really interesting. And how are you funding that?
Well, as always, funding is always a major problem. I was really lucky to get the Jean Guild Award, so that's helping towards producing materials. But for the outreach programme, we've done a crowdfunding, and that's ticking away. But obviously, the more help we get, the better programme we can do, and also move on with future projects. So we don't want to stop here. I think that's the thing. There is so much more that we need to do. This is just one phase of what I think is going to be a much bigger project.
I'll put a link to the crowdfunding on the blurb for the podcast. I'll also put a link to the website for this and highlight that people can come here. Obviously, they can't go into the Trinity Apse Church. You can go and see some of the other stones.
The other thing, from my perspective, because it's what I'm most involved in, is that I lead this Trinity network, and we want people to join that as well, because that's another way as anybody who's got any interest can help us with research or can help us raise awareness. And I go out and give talks, Hetty gives talks, and we're really keen to connect with people from other heritage groups or just really interested individuals. So that's the Trinity Network, and if they get in touch, then I'd be delighted to welcome them to that.
So I'll put the contact details on the blurb of the podcast for people who might want to do that. And if someone was sitting on their fancy terrace in Morningside, sipping morning coffee while they listen to this, and they notice that they've got some fancy stones that they've always wondered what they were in their rockery, what do they do about that now?
They can send an email to me at that address that you're going to give them, and I will be out there like a shot to have a look at it.
But you won't take them away?
Absolutely not. They are theirs forever. Just look after them and enjoy them.
Right.
And the project wouldn't even say where they were?
No, that's really
So you wouldn't have
important.
people wandering around in your garden trying to do a treasure hunt of their own. There's nothing like that. They would remain private. It would just be that they would just be recorded as part of the project.
But if people want to go and view some of the stones themselves in Edinburgh, where are the best places to go?
So the 3 easiest places to access would be here at the Museum of Edinburgh courtyard in the Canongate. This is the rear courtyard, so you do have to come through the entire museum to get to it, and it's only open in the summer, but the museum is open 7 days a week.
And is free.
And is free, yeah, absolutely. And you should come and visit the museum anyway. It's an amazing place. The other place would be Greyfriars Kirkyard, And there are also some stones, Trinity stones, in the National Museum of Scotland as well, on the ground floor.
Okay, I'll list those on the podcast too.
Obviously, we are very grateful to the Edinburgh Council and the Museum of Galleries, particularly because they've been really supportive of this whole project. They've been working with Jill, they've been working with the Old Edinburgh Club to make sure that this all happens. I think that's one of the nice things about this project. It's been very collaborative between different groups and different individuals, and they've been very kind in letting us record podcasts today, particularly, obviously, both the people who look after the graveyards and also the Museums and Galleries team.
We're going to head off now to Greyfriars, aren't we, to go and see the stones there. But I was just wondering, I'm not going to put you through the usual questions, Jill, but one thing I wondered was, where's your favourite place in Edinburgh?
Well, I thought about that, where it might be, and where I find myself often is opposite the Museum of Edinburgh in the garden at Dunbar's Close, which nobody, again, a little forgotten space that's so special. And when the mile is teeming, you can just go through the archway and sit there, and I think about what the merchants' houses and gardens would be like at the time of the Trinity and take myself back. And that's my special place in Edinburgh.
Hetty and I know it well.
We do.
We did a recording in there.
We did.
Didn't we? With some
Plant explorers
with some construction work in the background. Right, we're walking into Greyfriars Kirkyard, which is teeming with people, mainly Greyfriars Bobby and Harry Potter fans. It's really busy. It's a nice bird song though. And we're going to go and find some stones.
Greyfriars Kirk's got a nice little museum inside it as well, actually. Interestingly, the kirkyard actually comes under the aegis of the council, not the church.
So where are we going?
I thought it was these ones because they looked about the right date. Not the lovely man.
Not him. Not that. That
one.
Okay. Possibly that. Possibly that, although I don't know what it is.
Okay.
But it's this one. You see?
Oh, look at those little
We've got our little heads. Aren't they cute?
We do.
So why are they embedded in this wall here?
I have no idea. But it makes kind of sense because they're exactly the little bits that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
That would
These little faces
that people would have fallen in love with. And what should we do with this?
Curls. And this one over here is quite impy looking. Like, he's a bit creepy, if I'm honest. I'm not sure about him. This one is looking...
Oh, he's a bit creepy.
Right. The similar style that we saw on all the bosses and the capitals. And so you're saying maybe this one as well, Jill? I hadn't really noticed those before. We've got another...
It says Scottish or something, does it?
16th. 1 o'clock.
Oh yes, that was the 1 o'clock gun. We're on a lower bit of Greyfriars Kirkyard. We're away from all the Harry Potter shenanigans, and we're on a curved wall sort of over towards Heriot's, and embedded in the wall are these heads and stones, some of which my resident experts believe to be Trinity stones.
The oldest tombs are the ones along the other wall. They're the oldest ones, with George Heriot's dad is over there and stuff. And then these ones, originally they were put against walls, and then later on they get to be in the middle. But there's way more people buried here than there are stones. So there's thought to be about 100,000 people buried in here.
So these 100,000?
Yeah.
Wow.
And because it was the main burial ground for Edinburgh. Wow. So originally, the first burial ground would have been around the St Giles Kirk. And then in the 16th century, this ground actually starts off as a Greyfriars Friary. So the Greyfriars started off as a Franciscan priory in the 16th, maybe the 15th century. And then by the time you get into Protestant Reformation, Mary Queen of Scots takes the land off them and gifts it to the city as an extra burial ground, because St Giles is, quite frankly, really, really full. And so this was the main one, really, until you start getting the other old burial grounds. So this is full of people.
Wow.
And most of you didn't have gravestones. So a lot of these... And they also removed the gravestones at one particular point in history.
Yeah.
So we actually don't really know where people are.
No.
I love the fact that in Scotland they're called layers.
Right, so they are
Rather than
basically
tombs.
layers. Well,
Yeah,
that's what
they're
they
kind of
are,
layers.
isn't it?
So Mark from the Friends of Greyfriars Kirkyard was really interesting on his walk, and he explained how Protestantism brought different types of burials and remembrances of death, and so the change in religion basically changed how you were buried and the types of things that decorated your grave.
I wonder if it's, again, the stonemason.
So many in walls in other places. So it's obviously, what should we do with this bit? Right, I'm building a wall. We'll just put it in the wall. Because this is a bit like the Wild West Yard at Morningside, and a bit like Astley Ainsley, the wall there. Exactly the same thing, that they've put them in, and they're all near masons' yards.
But here, we're in a kirkyard. You wonder why they need to... But I rather like it.
As well, I think the idea that graveyards were very solemn spaces doesn't go back that far. So graveyards were spaces that were used for lots of different things. Whereas now, we tend to have this kind of, we should be very respectful and that type of thing. Whereas, not that they weren't respectful as such, but it's kind of like, oh, we're going to put up a new wall, and we've got these old stones lying around, like, why don't we just pop them in the wall? Because it's better than them just sitting in the shed. So this is probably another Trinity stone.
Yes, I think so, because that's similar.
It's just that very similar look to it.
Yeah.
Whereas that one, not.
Somebody's crest.
And that's later.
That looks a lot later.
Yeah.
So this looks more like the kind of date that you get with George Heriot's.
Yeah.
That kind of...
Neo-Gothic almost.
Yeah. So, this is worth coming to visit. Obviously, the graveyard is always worth coming to visit. It gets quite busy, but you can get away from the people.
It's just so amazing that people will walk straight past that and they'll never realise what it is.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's older than the burial ground that you're walking through.
And probably more precious.
Yeah, and it's also an example of this thing you've been talking about Edinburgh's stonemasons and all the naughty things they get up to, and also just that they thought it would be decorative rather than solemn. Though that is very solemn.
So that was one of the other things Mark was talking about, actually, was this kind of symbology that you get on the different gravestones. And so because you could sort of reference Christ very much, because of Protestantism not really wanting figures and things like this, but something being crossed in the same way that we know that Xmas means Christmas, the X, everybody just knew that an X symbol represented Christ.
Oh.
So you find crossed coffins, crossed bones, crossed gravediggers' tools, all sorts of things you'll find being crossed on the old graves in Edinburgh. And apparently that was this idea that you were representing Christ without having his figure on it.
So the exhibition, just to say it again, is from the 9th of May to the end of June, and people can find out more on the website, which of course I'll put at the end of the podcast. And I think it's all really exciting. I'm really looking forward to seeing the exhibition, and thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. We always love talking about this. It's terrific. Thank you.
It's been great to come out. Bit of a tour around, which was nice, and to get into a place that people can't normally go into. So thank you very much. That was a fascinating glimpse into a project which I really enjoyed hearing about, and the Museum of Edinburgh is also worth going to visit. And as always, thank you for listening to Edinburgh Outdoors. If you enjoyed the podcast, please rate and even write a review, and don't forget to tell others about it too. And if you know of a green space in or around Edinburgh that might like to be featured, please get in touch.